Pick up my twin kids from school. Your sister and parents are on vacation. Care for them. My sister texted the family group chat like she was issuing a mandatory royal decree. Seconds later, my mother chimed in. You live alone, Adelaide. Help your sister. They had all snuck off to a 5-star spa resort in Cabo, completely abandoning my 7-year-old twin nephews, assuming I'd just roll over and play unpaid babysitter for a week. They thought because I didn't have kids of my own, my time held zero value. But they forgot one tiny detail. I hold the master lease and the emergency contact authorization. This time, I didn't step in. I stepped out, executed a calculated play, and turned their relaxing vacation into an absolute operational nightmare. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my voice reaches. My name is Adelaide Brooks. I'm 27 years old, and up until last Tuesday, my family treated me like a full-time backup plan. It was 2:15 p.m. on a crisp autumn afternoon when my phone vibrated on my desk. I picked it up, expecting a routine update, but instead, I found a bomb waiting in our family group chat. Pick up my twin kids from school. Your sister and parents are on vacation. Take care of them for a week. The message was from my older sister Chloe. No, please, no advance notice. Just a direct demand sent 45 minutes before the dismissal bell. Before I could even type a response, a second notification popped up. It was my mother. You live alone, Adelaide. Help your sister. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest as the truth began to piece itself together. They hadn't just gone on a quick weekend trip. Chloe, her husband, and both of my parents had quietly packed up and flown out to an all-inclusive luxury resort in Cabo for a full 7 days. They didn't ask if I was free, if I had work deadlines, or if I even had food in my fridge. They simply assumed that because I was single and didn't have children of my own, my time was entirely worthless. They expected me to drop my entire life to play unpaid nanny for 7-year-old twins. But this time, they miscalculated. This wasn't the first time they'd pulled something like this, but it was definitely the most blatant. For years, I'd been the resident doormat of the family. Whenever Chloe wanted a spontaneous weekend getaway or needed someone to cover her responsibilities, the phone call always came to me. Adelaide, you're so flexible, they'd say. Adelaide, you don't have a family of your own yet, so it's easier for you. My mother was the ultimate architect of this dynamic. She had spent my entire adult life enabling Chloe's total lack of planning while laying heavy guilt trips on me if I ever dared to hesitate. If I said I had plans, I was called selfish. If I mentioned my workload, I was told that family always comes first, unless, of course, it was my comfort being considered. I was expected to step in, clean up their chaos, and smile while doing it. Last year, I missed a major promotion deadline because Chloe dumped the twins on me with zero notice so she could attend a last-minute music festival. When I tried to explain how much that set me back professionally, my mother brushed it off, saying, "Work will always be there, Adelaide, but your nephews need you." Sitting at my desk, looking at that group chat message, the years of quiet resentment finally crystallized into absolute clarity. I realized that my silence had been permission. By always stepping up to save them, I had taught them that my boundaries didn't exist. Today, that lesson was officially over. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I took a slow, deliberate breath. I didn't type out a long explanation, nor did I offer a polite excuse that they could negotiate with. I simply replied, "No, I am not available to pick up the kids or watch them this week." Within seconds, my phone erupted. First came a barrage of frantic group chat messages from Chloe, demanding to know what was wrong with me, followed immediately by incoming calls from both my mother and sister. When I let the calls ring through to voicemail, the text messages turned vicious. Chloe accused me of being a heartless monster who was willing to let 7-year-old children sit abandoned on a curb, while my mother sent 3 separate voice notes crying about how I was ruining their long-awaited family vacation. They expected me to panic, cave under the guilt, and rush to the school. Instead, I picked up my desk phone and called the elementary school's main office. I politely informed the receptionist that I had just received a text asking me to pick up my nephews, but I was out of town for work and unable to get them. I advised them to call the designated, paid emergency contact service Chloe had listed on their official file, the same service she was supposed to use when she didn't have childcare. Once that call was made, I closed my laptop, packed my weekend bag, and locked up my apartment. I had already booked a small cabin 2 hours away for the weekend, intending to go later that night, but I decided to leave right then. As I hit the highway, I switched my phone to Do Not Disturb, cutting off the flood of incoming rage and let the quiet sink in. While I was driving up into the quiet mountain roads, total chaos was unfolding thousands of miles away in Cabo. Because I refused to step into my usual role as the family rug, the school had no choice but to follow standard protocol. When dismissal passed and neither parent nor authorized guardian showed up, the administrative office immediately called the emergency contacts on file, eventually reaching Chloe directly on her cell phone while she was lounging by the resort pool. The realization hit her like a bucket of ice water. The school was firm. If an authorized contact didn't collect the boys within the hour, they would have to involve Child Protective Services for abandoned minors. Panic completely shattered their idyllic beach day. Chloe, her husband, and my parents were forced to abandon their drinks, sprint back to their hotel rooms, and begin making desperate, high-priced phone calls from another country. Since they couldn't reach me, they had to hire an emergency short-notice professional nanny agency, paying exorbitant rush fees and international coordination costs, just to have someone vetted pick up the twins and house them for the night. They also had to rebook their flights, cutting their multi-thousand-dollar luxury vacation short by 5 whole days. When I finally checked my phone at the cabin late that evening, the screen was practically glowing red. I had over 80 missed calls and hundreds of furious text messages in the group chat. Chloe claimed I had single-handedly ruined their $10,000 family retreat, while my mother insisted I owed them every single penny they had lost in emergency fees. But as I looked out over the quiet trees, I didn't feel a single drop of guilt. They had built their dream vacation on the assumption of my submission, and the foundation had finally cracked. By Sunday afternoon, the holiday was officially dead, and the storm had landed directly on my doorstep. I returned from my cabin trip to find Chloe's SUV parked illegally in front of my apartment complex. Before I could even put my keys away, my door handle rattled, followed by a series of aggressive, pounding knocks. I opened the door, keeping the safety chain engaged. Standing on the landing were Chloe, her husband Mark, and my mother. All 3 of them looked exhausted, sunburnt, and utterly furious. They had flown back early, paid thousands in emergency nanny fees, and spent the entire flight stewing in their own anger. "Open this door right now, Adelaide," Chloe barked, her voice echoing down the hallway. "You have any idea what you put us through? You ruined our entire trip. You owe us $4,000 for the emergency agency and the rescheduled flights." My mother stepped forward, her face twisted in disappointment. "How could you be so cruel to your own blood, Adelaide? Those poor boys were terrified." I unlatched the chain and stepped out into the hallway, standing tall. I didn't raise my voice, and I didn't offer an apology. The only people who endangered those boys were the parents who flew to another country without securing childcare, I said, looking Chloe dead in the eye. "You didn't ask me. You didn't plan. You assumed you could force me into unpaid labor because you don't respect my life or my time. I am not your free nanny, and I will not be paying a single cent for a mess you created yourself." The hallway went dead silent. Mark shifted uncomfortably behind Chloe, suddenly looking anywhere but at me, while my mother's mouth hung open in genuine shock. They weren't used to me standing my ground, and my total calm threw them completely off balance. "You think this is funny?" Chloe hissed, though her voice lacked its previous bite. "We're out thousands of dollars, Adelaide." "Then maybe you shouldn't have booked an expensive resort when you couldn't afford proper childcare," I replied coldly. That hit a nerve. Over the next few minutes of back and forth shouting, the truth finally spilled out. Chloe and Mark hadn't just blown money on Cabo, they were drowning in credit card debt. They had banked on using my free labor to make their dream vacation affordable, hiding their financial strain behind a wall of entitlement. When my mother realized that Chloe had lied about having everything covered before they left, the united front began to crumble right there in the corridor. My mother turned to Chloe, her voice dropping as the reality set in. She had enabled this dependency for years, constantly forcing me to play safety net for a daughter who refused to take responsibility for her own life. For the first time, my mother saw the toxic monster her favoritism had created. I looked at all three of them, exhausted by their drama, and made my final stance crystal clear. I am done being the family fix-it. Do not ever schedule your life around my availability again. Then, I stepped back inside and shut the door. Standing alone in my quiet apartment that evening, a profound sense of peace washed over me. For the first time at 27, I finally stopped letting guilt dictate my life and claimed my own freedom. Setting boundaries wasn't about being cruel, it was about teaching people how to respect my self-worth. They haven't asked me to babysit since, and my life is entirely my own. Now, I'm curious about you who listen to my story. Have you ever had to stand your ground against entitled family members? Comment below and let me know your thoughts.